we're having good talks. We started with Russia. We're having some talks with Russia. Ukraine is doing well. I think they're pretty happy about it. They'd like to see it end. And we won't know for a little while, but we're making progress. People are starting to realize it's a good deal for both parties. If they got to stop the war, they're losing a lot of people, a lot of soldiers, mostly soldiers.
And you heard it there. President Donald Trump says they are making progress in peace talks to end the 4-year war between Russia and Ukraine. That message comes after a U.S. official told CBS News yesterday that Ukraine, quote, agreed to a peace deal with only minor details left to sort out. But the Kremlin is throwing cold water on that optimism. According to Reuters, when asked if a peace deal was near, Russian spokesman Dmitry Peskov says it's, quote, premature to say. Now let's bring in CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand for how all of this is playing out at the White House. Natalie, happy Thanksgiving to you. What else are we hearing from the Russian side of this?
Yeah. Good morning, Mugo. Good afternoon. We are hearing from the Kremlin kind of lowering expectations that a peace resolution is close to the final stages. And in fact, Russia's deputy foreign minister in new comments acknowledged the negotiations underway, but at the same time said that there can be no talk of concessions on these key objectives that are so critical in getting to a peace deal and ending Russia's war on Ukraine. And we also have a new statement, new this hour, from the vice president of the European Commission, who said that foreign ministers in Europe had a video call today to discuss the latest developments, this fast-moving diplomacy. And she said right now they see, quote, zero indication that Russia is ready for a ceasefire, adding that an immediate and unconditional ceasefire must be the first step to ending the war, Mugo.
Yeah, so in the meantime, what does the Trump administration say is the next step in all this?
Yeah, well, President Trump kind of detailing where we are on social media ahead of leaving for Florida for the Thanksgiving holiday said that over the last week there's been tremendous progress in these talks, noting that the original 28-point peace plan has been updated and fine-tuned with additional input from both sides. But he also noted that there are a few remaining points of disagreement. So he was asked more about the next steps on Air Force One last night. Take a listen.
They're going to keep talking. They're talking to Russia now. Steve Witkoff is going over, maybe with Jared. I'm not sure about Jared going, but he's involved in the process, smart guy, and they're going to be meeting with President Putin, I believe, next week in Moscow.
So you heard the president there say that his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, will be soon heading to Moscow, likely early next week. And he said that the Army Secretary, Dan Driscoll, will continue talks with the Ukrainian side. This comes after that big day of negotiations in Geneva between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his Ukrainian counterparts. Now, remember earlier this week we were talking about the president kind of floating this Thanksgiving deadline. Well, that appears to now be off the table. And when asked about, whether there could be an upcoming meeting in coming days with Zelensky, the president noted that he hopes or looks forward to soon meeting with President Zelensky and Putin, but only after a deal is in its very final stages, Mugo.
Okay, Natalie Brand at the White House for us today. Thank you so much. And now I want to bring in Iulia Joja. She is an adjunct professor from Georgetown University and a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. Iulia, thank you for your time today. What is your take on how negotiations are playing out at this point?
Thanks for having me, Mugo. Well, we don't know. There's been a lot of confusion over the last almost a week since the first versions of this peace plan have been leaked. It was 28 points, then we heard it was 30, now it is negotiated down to 18. The initial model apparently has been the 20 point of the Middle East Gaza plan, but none of the versions have been confirmed or sort of owned by any of the initial negotiating sides, which are the United States and Russia. Then we've seen the plan going back, as you just mentioned, to the Europeans and to the Ukrainians that were not involved in the initial drafting, which in itself is very unconventional, whether we're talking about a real estate deal or a peace deal. And now we are in this unclear phase where we've heard the president mentioning that the special envoy Witkoff is now in Moscow, that Jared Kushner might be with him, but we've also heard the Russians postponing. And if we draw the line, indeed, there's very little indication from one side that they want to agree to something. The Ukrainians have said they are good to go with the version that they have negotiated over the last few days in Switzerland. The Russians are unlikely to do so. And just as a reminder, the Ukrainians have agreed to a request from us, from the United States, specifically the White House, at the beginning of the year, February, March, to an unconditional ceasefire, which would set the conditions for peace negotiations for a just and sustainable peace. The Russians have not. And just last night, they continued bombing Ukraine.
Yeah. Now, just this morning, a member of the Ukrainian parliament joined CBS News to talk about her thoughts on the U.S.-backed peace plan. Let's listen to what she had to say.
I believe there are already enough of the evidence that so-called 28 points plan were drafted in Russia, in Russian language, then translated in English and basically communicated to Ukraine and Ukrainians through US. This is absolutely not acceptable. There is one thing that you should keep in mind about Ukraine. Ukraine is a democratic country. So you can't force politicians to sign any document if it is not accepted by Ukrainian society. Otherwise, there will be revolutions. Otherwise, there will be a huge, actually, consequences for all negotiators who are taking place. This is my first point. Second point, it is absolutely not acceptable to include any topics or any discussions about trading land.
So, Iulia, does this seem to be the sentiment across all of Ukraine?
Indeed, the member of the Verkhovna Rada of the Ukrainian parliament is rightly in this case reflecting the popular opinion. Several international media outlets have conducted either opinion polls or just asked regular Ukrainians on the street in the first few days as the news of this plan was sinking in what they think, and there was almost an absolute majority, I think around 90%, that said that this is unacceptable. We've also seen some direct language from the Ukrainian president in that, and in him alluding to the fact that he doesn't have a mandate from the people to agree to cut Ukrainian territorial integrity and maybe even parts of its sovereignty, as according to the first version of the peace plan. And the Europeans, the French president and others have had even harsher language, calling the initial version a capitulation rather than a deal that is being negotiated, at least in some fair manner on both sides. And we're still on this premise in which one country is the aggressor, the other one is the victim. And so this reaction, either politically from the Ukrainian parliament or in terms of public opinion, is quite understandable.
Yeah. Iulia Joja, thank you so much for your insight today. Appreciate your time.